The bitter wind howled like a wounded animal across the desolate Wyoming landscape, carrying with it flakes of snow that seemed to bite at Amelia Jensen's exposed skin as she trudged forward. Her 8-month-old daughter Clara clutched tightly to her chest. The stagecoach that had abandoned them was now merely a speck on the horizon, the driver having tossed her small trunk onto the ground before whipping the horses onward after discovering she couldn't pay the remainder of the fare. Tears froze on her cheeks as she continued walking, following the rutted trail that supposedly led to the mining town of Silver Creek. "We'll be all right, my sweet girl," Amelia whispered, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. Clara whimpered against her mother's thin coat, her tiny face red from the cold despite being wrapped in Amelia's woolen shawl. The late November snow was falling faster now, the afternoon sun already beginning to set behind the mountains. Soon it would be dark, and Amelia knew what that meant in these parts during the winter of 1876. Her husband Thomas had described this territory in his letters beautiful but unforgiving. He'd come west 8 months prior, just before Clara was born, promising to establish a life for them at the silver mines. His last letter had arrived 3 months ago, filled with hope and plans, directing her to join him in Silver Creek. But when no more correspondence came, desperation had driven Amelia to sell nearly everything they owned back in Ohio and make the journey anyway, praying he'd be waiting. Now, as the temperature continued to drop and Clara's cries grew weaker, terror gripped Amelia's heart. They wouldn't survive the night in the open. The snow was nearly ankle-deep, soaking through her worn boots, and her fingers had long since lost feeling. A sound cut through the wind, not the howl of a wolf, which she'd been dreading, but the rhythmic pounding of hooves. Amelia turned, squinting through the swirling snow, and made out the silhouette of a rider approaching. "Please," she whispered, too exhausted to wave or call out. "Please help us." The horse slowed as it neared, and Amelia could see it was a sturdy palomino with a muscular man astride it. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the weather. "Madam," the rider's deep voice carried concern as he guided his horse closer. "What in God's name are you doing out here with a child?" Amelia swayed on her feet, the world tilting precariously. "The stagecoach. They left us. I couldn't pay the full fare." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his considerable height. As he approached, she could see a strong-jawed face partially hidden behind a reddish-brown beard dusted with snow. His eyes, a piercing blue, quickly assessed their situation. "Preston Reed," he said simply, moving closer and peering at the bundle in her arms. "Your little one still breathing?" Amelia nodded weakly. "Clara, she's so cold." Preston's weathered face softened momentarily before hardening with resolve. He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around Amelia and the baby in one swift movement. "You're not freezing tonight," he stated firmly, as if challenging the very elements to dispute him. "Not on my watch." Before Amelia could respond, he'd lifted her and Clara effortlessly onto his horse, then gathered her small trunk and secured it. In moments, he was mounted behind her, one strong arm around her waist steadying her while the other held the reins. "My ranch is closer than town. We'll head there." His voice rumbled against her back. "Lean against me, madam. Share the warmth." Too exhausted to argue or question, Amelia did as instructed, feeling the solid wall of his chest supporting her. Clara had quieted, nestled between them. "I'm Amelia," she managed. "Amelia Jensen." "Thank you, Mr. Reed." "Preston," he corrected, urging the horse forward through the thickening snow. "And save your thanks for when we're by a warm fire." As they rode, the storm intensified. Preston kept his horse at a steady pace, occasionally murmuring reassurances when Amelia tensed at particularly strong gusts of wind. She fought to stay conscious, knowing that succumbing to the seductive pull of sleep in this cold could be fatal. "Talk to me," Preston said after a while. "Keep your mind working. What brings you to these parts?" Through chattering teeth, Amelia told him about Thomas, the silver mines, and her journey from Ohio. Preston listened without comment, though she felt him tense slightly when she mentioned her husband. Silver Creek's mines. He finally asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes. He wrote that he'd found work there, said it would change our fortunes." Preston was quiet for several moments before responding. "The mines at Silver Creek shut down in September. Cave-in killed 8 men." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow. She would have fallen had Preston not tightened his hold. "I'm sorry," he added softly. "I didn't mean to, no," Amelia interrupted, her voice hollow. "I needed to know." They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the wind, the horses' labored breathing, and occasional soft noises from Clara. Amelia's mind raced with implications. Thomas dead, her meager savings spent on the journey west, no prospects, no home, and a child to care for. "There," Preston finally said, pointing through the snow. "That's my place." Amelia could just make out the dark shape of a sturdy cabin with a barn alongside it. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. As they drew closer, a dog began barking, and a lantern light appeared in the window. The door swung open as Preston guided his horse to the hitching post, revealing a weathered older man holding a shotgun. "Put that away, Hank," Preston called. "Got visitors needing shelter." The man called Hank lowered his weapon, eyeing them with curiosity. "Didn't expect you back till tomorrow, boss. Plans changed." Preston dismounted and reached up for Amelia and Clara. "This is Mrs. Jensen and her daughter. They need warming up right quick." Amelia found herself being carried over the threshold of the cabin, Clara still clutched to her chest. The warmth inside was like a physical entity, washing over her frozen skin with almost painful intensity. "Madam," Hank nodded respectfully, setting his shotgun aside. "I'll see to your horse, boss." "Much obliged," Preston replied, gently setting Amelia down on a chair near the roaring fireplace. "Put him in his stall with extra feed. He's earned it." As Hank departed, Preston crouched before Amelia. "Let me see the little one." With trembling hands, Amelia unwrapped Clara from the shawl. The baby's eyes were open, blinking slowly in the firelight, her cheeks pinked by the warmth. Preston smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his rugged features. "She's a fighter, this one, like her mama." Amelia felt tears well up again, this time from relief. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need." Preston rose and moved to a pot simmering on the stove. "Hank's venison stew, not fancy, but it'll put warmth back in your bones." As Preston prepared bowls of the savory-smelling stew, Amelia took in her surroundings. The cabin was larger than it had appeared from outside, with sturdy log walls and a plank floor partially covered by woven rugs. A dining table, chairs, and a settee made up the main room, with doors leading presumably to bedrooms. Everything was clean and orderly, if simple. "You have a lovely home," she offered, accepting the steaming bowl he extended. Preston gave a short laugh. "It serves its purpose. Been meaning to make improvements, but the ranch keeps me busy." "Are you a cattleman?" "Horses, mainly. I break and train them for the army, ranchers, and such. Some cattle, too, enough to get by." They ate in companionable silence for a while, Clara eventually falling asleep in the crook of Amelia's arm. When she had finished her stew, the reality of her situation crashed over her anew. "Mr. Reed, Preston," she began hesitantly, "I need to ask if Silver Creek has any work for a woman." I can cook, clean, so I was a school teacher before I married. Preston studied her across the table. Town's rough, especially for a woman alone with a child. The mine closing hit everyone hard. Most folks with sense have moved on. Amelia felt the last of her hope crumbling. I see. You need rest, Preston said, rising from his chair. We'll figure things out come morning. I'll show you to the spare room. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in patchwork quilts. A basin of water sat on a stand beside it. It's not much, Preston said, almost apologetically. It's perfect, Amelia replied sincerely. I can't thank you enough. Something flickered in Preston's eyes, sadness perhaps, or some memory. No one should be left in the snow, he said quietly, especially not with a child. With that, he wished her good night and closed the door, leaving Amelia to wonder about the man who had saved them from certain death. Morning came with sunlight streaming through the small window, illuminating dancing dust motes. For a moment, Amelia was disoriented, then Clara's soft cooing brought her fully awake. The events of the previous day flooded back, and with them, the crushing reality of her situation. She rose, finding that someone had placed a basin of fresh water, a towel, and a bar of soap on the stand while she slept. After washing and tending to Clara, she straightened her rumpled dress as best she could and ventured into the main room. Preston stood at the stove, his back to her, broad shoulders moving as he stirred something in a pan. He'd shaved, she noticed, revealing a strong jawline previously hidden by his beard. His reddish-brown hair was damp, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. "Good morning," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, a smile brightening his face when he saw Clara awake and alert in her arms. "Morning. You both look better today. Sleep well, better than I expected to," Amelia admitted. "Thank you again for your kindness." Preston waved away her thanks. "Eggs and bacon almost ready. Coffee's hot if you'd like some." They ate breakfast with Hank joining them, the older man gruff but kind, especially toward Clara, whom he entertained with funny faces that made the baby giggle. After the meal, Preston invited Amelia to join him on the porch. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine white landscape glittering in the morning sun. Mountains rose in the distance, majestic and imposing. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Preston observed, leaning against the porch rail. "Breathtaking," Amelia agreed, adjusting Clara on her hip. "I can see why people come west despite the hardships." Preston nodded, his gaze distant. "Been here 10 years now, can't imagine being anywhere else." "Are you from back east originally? Pennsylvania, coal mining town?" His mouth twisted. "Swore I'd never go underground again if I made it west. Something about being under all that rock never sat right with me." Amelia thought of Thomas, possibly buried in the collapsed mine, and shivered despite the sun's warmth. Preston noticed her reaction and straightened. "I've been thinking about your situation, Mrs. Jensen. Amelia, please. Amelia." He said her name carefully, as if testing how it felt. "Way I see it, you need somewhere safe while you figure out next steps. The nearest town with real opportunities for a woman of your education would be Cheyenne, but that's a 4-day journey in good weather." He paused, seeming to choose his next words with care. "I propose you stay here through winter at least. I could use help with the accounts and correspondence for the horse business. My handwriting's terrible, and figures were never my strong suit, and Hank's cooking is." He grimaced slightly. "Functional at best." Amelia blinked in surprise. "You're offering me employment." "Room, board, and a small wage," Preston confirmed. "For you and your daughter. Come spring, if you want to move on, I'll personally see you safely to Cheyenne." It was more than she could have hoped for, yet caution made her hesitate. "It's very generous, but I wouldn't want to impose or cause any." "Talk." "A woman living under your roof, Hank, lives here too," Preston pointed out, "and I've a reputation in these parts. No one would question my motives." He smiled slightly. "Besides, folks around here know better than to gossip about Preston Reed's business." Something in his tone suggested there was a story there, but Amelia didn't press. Instead, she considered his offer objectively. She had nowhere else to go, no money to speak of, and a child depending on her. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I accept," she said finally, "and I promise to earn my keep." Preston's smile widened. Never doubted it for a moment. The days that followed established a routine. Amelia took over the household accounts. Discovering that Preston had been underselling himself, his horse business was thriving, with orders from as far as Denver and Salt Lake City. She organized his haphazard paperwork, implemented a proper bookkeeping system, and began handling correspondence with his clients. Preston, she learned, had a remarkable way with horses. She often watched from the kitchen window as he worked with them in the corral, his movements calm and assured, his voice a steady murmur that seemed to soothe even the wildest animals. He approached them with respect rather than domination, a philosophy that appeared to extend to his dealings with people as well. Hank, it turned out, was a former cavalry soldier who'd ridden with Preston during the war and followed him west afterward. He was gruff but kind-hearted, especially toward Clara, fashioning her a wooden rattle that became her favorite toy. As December progressed, Amelia found herself settling into life at the ranch, her grief for Thomas still present but tempered by the necessities of daily living. She took over the cooking, mended clothes, and kept the cabin tidy, insisting on contributing more than just the bookkeeping to earn her keep. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Clara, already asleep in the small crib Preston had unexpectedly produced from the barn, had it made for a neighbor's baby, but they moved on before I could deliver it. Amelia finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "How did you come to be riding in that snowstorm yesterday? You mentioned you weren't expected back until the next day." Preston, whittling a piece of wood, paused. "Had a feeling," he said simply. Skye had that certain look, decided to head home early rather than risk being caught out in it. "Lucky for us you did," Amelia said softly. Preston's hands resumed their work, shaping the wood with practiced strokes. "Maybe not luck," he said after a while. "My mother would have called it providence. You don't strike me as a religious man, Mr. Reed." "Preston," he reminded her. "And I suppose I'm not, in the church-going sense, but I've seen enough in my time to believe there's something bigger than us at work." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Something that puts people in the right place at the right time." The way he held her gaze made Amelia's heart beat faster. She looked away first, suddenly conscious of the intimacy of the moment. "What are you making?" she asked, nodding toward his hands. Preston turned the wood, revealing the emerging shape of a small horse. "For Clara. Thought she might like a toy from the ranch to remember her time here." The simple gesture touched Amelia deeply. "That's very kind." Preston shrugged, seemingly embarrassed by her gratitude. "It's nothing. Helps keep my hands busy in the evenings." As Christmas approached, the ranch was blanketed in snow, transforming it into a scene from a fairy tale. Despite their circumstances, Amelia was determined to create some holiday cheer, especially for Clara's first Christmas. She secretly sewed a small dress for her daughter from fabric remnants she found in a trunk Preston said she was welcome to use, and baked gingerbread using precious spices Hank procured on a supply run to the nearest trading post. On Christmas Eve, as they gathered around the fire after a simple but satisfying dinner, Preston cleared his throat. "I have something for you both," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "For Christmas." He went to his room and returned with 2 packages wrapped in brown paper and string. "The larger one's for later," he explained, handing the smaller one to Amelia. "This one's for now." Curious, Amelia unwrapped the package to find a beautiful leather-bound journal and a pen with a mother-of-pearl handle. "I noticed you writing on scraps of paper sometimes," Preston explained. "Thought you might like something proper to write in." "It's beautiful," Amelia said sincerely, running her fingers over the supple leather. "Thank you." Preston nodded, a pleased expression crossing his face. "The other is for tomorrow morning." Christmas Day dawned clear and cold. Amelia woke to Clara's babbling and found the baby sitting up in her crib, playing with the wooden horse Preston had completed a few days earlier. "Merry Christmas, my love," Amelia whispered, lifting her daughter and pressing a kiss to her soft cheek. When they emerged from their room, they found Preston and Hank already up, the fire blazing and coffee brewing. A small pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with strings of dried berries, pine cones, and a few candles. "When did you do this?" Amelia asked in wonder. "Last night after you turned in," Preston explained, looking pleased at her reaction. "Thought the little one should have a proper Christmas tree." Breakfast was a festive affair, with flapjacks and maple syrup Hank had been hoarding for a special occasion. Afterward, they exchanged gifts. Amelia had knitted scarves for both men from yarn she'd unraveled from an old sweater in her trunk, and Preston seemed genuinely touched by the gesture. "Now for yours," he said, handing her the larger package from the night before. Amelia unwrapped it carefully, gasping when she saw what was inside. It was a winter coat, far finer than anything she'd owned before, made of dark blue wool with a fur-lined collar. "Preston, I can't possibly—" "You can and you will," he interrupted gently. "Wyoming winters are no joke, and that thin thing you were wearing when I found you wouldn't keep a cat warm." "It's beautiful," she admitted, running her fingers over the soft material. "But it must have cost." "I ordered it weeks ago," Preston said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean I had it ordered for." "Well, it doesn't matter. It fits you, that's what's important." Amelia suspected there was more to the story but didn't press. She slipped the coat on, marveling at its warmth and perfect fit. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing no words could adequately express her gratitude. Later, after Hank had retired to his room for a nap claiming too much Christmas cheer, Preston invited Amelia to take a short walk outside. Clara was sleeping soundly, and the cabin was warm enough that a brief absence wouldn't matter. The world outside was transformed, silent and pristine under its blanket of snow. They walked a short distance from the cabin, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. "I wanted to ask you something," Preston said finally, stopping to face her. Away from Hank's ears, Amelia felt a flutter of apprehension. "Oh, I've been corresponding with some folks in Cheyenne about starting a school there. The town's growing fast, lots of families moving in. They're looking for a teacher with experience." Amelia's heart sank. He was already planning for her departure. "I see." "I told them about you," Preston continued. "Your experience back east. They're interested, said they could have a position waiting for you come spring if you want it." "That's very kind of you to arrange," Amelia managed, trying to hide her disappointment. She'd grown comfortable here, perhaps too comfortable. Preston studied her face. "You don't seem pleased." "No, I am," she insisted. "It's a wonderful opportunity and very thoughtful of you to arrange it." "But," Preston prompted, somehow reading her hesitation. Amelia looked away, watching a cardinal land on a snow-covered branch nearby. "It's nothing. I've grown fond of the ranch is all, but I always knew it was temporary." Preston was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "What if it was?" Amelia's gaze snapped back to his face. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath as if gathering courage. I mean, what if you and Clara stayed, permanently? As your housekeeper and bookkeeper, you mean? Amelia clarified, her heart racing despite her attempt to remain calm. No, Preston took a step closer. Not as employees, understanding dawned slowly. Preston, I'm making a mess of this, he interrupted, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I had it all planned out what I'd say. Despite her confusion, Amelia couldn't help smiling at his discomfort. Perhaps just say what's in your heart. Preston took another deep breath. The coat I gave you, I ordered it months ago, before I met you. It was for my fiancée, Elizabeth. She was coming west to join me, but he swallowed hard. She changed her mind, wrote me a letter saying she'd met someone else, someone who could give her the city life she wanted. I'm sorry, Amelia said softly, understanding now why he'd been alone. I'm not, Preston said with surprising firmness. Because if she'd come, I wouldn't have been riding home early that day, wouldn't have found you and Clara. He reached out hesitantly, taking her gloved hand in his. I know it's too soon. You're still grieving Thomas, and we've only known each other a short while, but I've come to care for you both, more than I thought possible. Amelia stood very still, afraid that if she moved or spoke, the moment would shatter. I'm not asking for anything now, Preston continued. Just for you to consider staying, giving us a chance to see if what I'm feeling might grow between us. If not, the teaching position will still be there. It was too much to process at once, the admission of his feelings, the possibility of a future she hadn't dared imagine. Thomas had been gone less than 4 months, though it felt like a lifetime ago. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Don't say anything yet, Preston suggested. Just think about it. No pressure, no expectations. Amelia nodded slowly. I will think about it, I mean. Something like hope flickered in Preston's eyes. That's all I ask. January brought bitter cold and a snowstorm that kept them confined to the cabin for 3 days straight. The forced proximity could have been awkward after Preston's Christmas Day revelation, but instead, it strengthened the bonds between them. They played cards, told stories, and took turns entertaining Clara, who was now pulling herself up on furniture and babbling constantly. Preston, Amelia discovered, was a natural storyteller, regaling them with tales of his early days out west, encounters with various characters, and adventures with his horses. He never spoke of the war, though, and Amelia didn't ask, recognizing the shadows that crossed his face whenever it was mentioned. In return, she shared stories of her childhood in Cincinnati, her brief teaching career, and her courtship with Thomas. It no longer hurt to speak of him, she realized. The sharp pain had dulled to a gentle ache, a fond remembrance rather than devastating grief. One evening, as they sat by the fire while Hank snored softly in his chair and Clara slept in her crib, Preston looked up from the book he was reading. Have you thought any more about what we discussed at Christmas? He asked quietly. Amelia set aside her mending. I have. And, she chose her words carefully, I've realized that Thomas would want me to be happy, to provide a good life for Clara. He wouldn't expect me to mourn forever. Preston's expression remained neutral, though his knuckles whitened where he gripped his book. Is that a yes to staying, then? It's a yes to seeing where this might lead, Amelia clarified. I care for you, Preston, more than I expected to, but I need time. Relief washed over his features. Time we have plenty of, he assured her. Winter's long in these parts. February brought warmer days, though nights remained cold. The snow began to melt in patches, revealing glimpses of the earth beneath. Preston spent more time with the horses now, preparing them for spring buyers, and Amelia often brought Clara outside to watch him work. The baby was fascinated by the animals, squealing with delight whenever they came near the fence. Preston noticed her interest, and one day brought over a gentle mare named Daisy, holding Clara carefully so she could pat the horse's velvet nose. "She's a natural horsewoman," he declared proudly, as if Clara were his own daughter. The thought no longer startled Amelia as it once might have. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Sometimes Preston would take her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. Other times they simply sat in companionable silence, content in each other's presence. One such evening, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Preston turned to her. "I've been thinking about the ranch," he said. "About improvements." "Oh," Amelia prompted when he didn't continue. "The cabin's too small," he explained. "Been meaning to add on for years, just never saw the point when it was just me and Hank." Amelia's heart quickened. And now, Preston's eyes, so blue in the twilight, held hers. "Now I'm thinking a growing family needs more space, a proper parlor maybe. Another bedroom or two." "Growing family," Amelia repeated softly. Preston nodded, suddenly appearing uncertain. "If you'll have me, that is. I know I'm not much, just a rancher with rough ways, but I swear I'd be good to you and Clara. Love you both like you deserve." Amelia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Preston Reed, are you asking me to marry you?" He took her hand, his expression solemn. "I am. Probably too soon, and maybe I'm a fool for rushing, but I know my heart, Amelia. It's yours if you want it." The tears spilled over then, coursing down her cheeks. Preston's face fell. "I understand if it's too soon," he said quickly. "Like I said, the teaching position, yes," Amelia interrupted, squeezing his hand. Preston blinked. "Yes, it's too soon." "Yes, I'll marry you," Amelia clarified, laughing through her tears. "And yes, you are a fool, but so am I, a fool who's fallen in love with you." For a moment, Preston seemed frozen, then his face broke into a smile that transformed him. In one swift movement, he gathered her into his arms, lifting her off the porch floor and spinning her around. "You've made me the happiest man in Wyoming territory," he declared, setting her down gently. "Not yet," Amelia teased, her arms around his neck, "but I intend to." Their first kiss was tentative, a question and an answer all at once. The second was deeper, a promise of what was to come. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Amelia Jensen," he whispered. "You and Clara both." "And we love you," she replied, knowing it was true. Somehow, in the span of a few short months, this man had become essential to her happiness. They were married in early March by a traveling preacher who stopped at the ranch on his circuit. Hank stood as witness, Clara balanced on his hip, the old soldier beaming with pride as if he'd arranged the whole thing himself. Amelia wore a simple dress of pale blue, her hair adorned with early spring wildflowers Preston had somehow found. Their vows were traditional but heartfelt, each word spoken with absolute conviction. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared, and just like that, Amelia Jensen became Amelia Reed. That night, after Clara was asleep and Hank had tactfully announced he was spending the night in the barn to check on a colicky foal, Amelia stood nervously in the bedroom that was now hers and Preston's. Her new husband entered quietly, closing the door behind him. Having second thoughts, he asked, noticing her tension. Amelia shook her head. "Not at all, just, it's been a while." Preston crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "We have all the time in the world, Amelia. Nothing has to happen tonight if you're not ready." His consideration nearly undid her. "I am ready," she assured him. "I want to be your wife in every way." His kiss was gentle at first, then grew in intensity as she responded, her body remembering desires she'd thought long forgotten. When they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with tenderness that gradually gave way to passion, their bodies speaking what words could not fully express. Afterward, lying in his arms, Amelia thought of the journey that had brought her here, the grief, the desperation, the moment of absolute despair in the snow. How close she had come to losing everything, only to find more than she'd ever dared hope for. "What are you thinking about?" Preston murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That day in the snow," she admitted. "How different things might have been if you hadn't come along." Preston pulled her closer. "I've thought about that too, can't bear to imagine what might have happened." "You said it wasn't luck that brought you there, that it was Providence." "Still believe that," Preston confirmed. "Some things are meant to be, Amelia." She smiled in the darkness. "Like us. Especially us." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You and Clara were the missing pieces of my life. Just didn't know it until I found you." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The pastures turned green, wildflowers bloomed, and the mountains shed their white cloaks to reveal rocky splendor. Preston's horse business thrived under Amelia's organized management, allowing them to begin the cabin expansion they discussed. Clara took her first steps in April, tottering across the porch into Preston's waiting arms while Amelia watched, heart full to bursting. The baby now called him Pa, a development that brought tears to the tough rancher's eyes the first time he heard it. In May, Amelia confirmed what she'd suspected for weeks: she was expecting a child, due around Christmas. When she told Preston, he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, much as he had the night of his proposal. "Another Christmas miracle," he declared, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Best gift I could ask for." Summer passed in a blur of activity: the cabin expansion, horse training, a visit from the preacher who'd married them, now accompanied by his wife who became a fast friend to Amelia. The town of Silver Creek was slowly recovering from the mine disaster, and occasionally Preston would take Amelia and Clara there for supplies and socializing. On one such visit, Amelia insisted on visiting the small cemetery where the miners had been buried. Standing before Thomas's simple marker, Clara on her hip and Preston respectfully hanging back, she said a final goodbye to her first husband. "You brought me west," she whispered, "and in a way you led me to happiness, though not as either of us expected. I'll make sure Clara knows about you as she grows." As autumn painted the landscape in fiery hues, the cabin expansion was completed: 2 new bedrooms, a proper parlor, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides of the house. Preston had insisted on comforts Amelia hadn't expected, ordering carpets and furniture from Denver, determined that his wife and children would have a proper home. December arrived with gentle snows and anticipation. Clara, now walking confidently and chattering constantly, seemed to understand that something important was happening. She patted Amelia's rounded belly and said "baby" with solemn conviction. On Christmas Eve, almost exactly 1 year after Preston had given Amelia the coat that had belonged to another woman, their son was born. They named him Paul Thomas Reed, Paul for Preston's father, Thomas in memory of the man who had, in his way, brought them together. As snow fell gently outside, the newly expanded family gathered by the fireplace in their home. Hank had retired to his room after holding the baby and declaring him a fine Reed man in the making. Clara was curled up asleep on a blanket nearby, exhausted from the excitement. Preston sat beside Amelia on the settee, one arm around her shoulders, the other cradling their newborn son. The fire crackled merrily, casting a golden glow over the scene. "Happy?" Preston asked softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. Amelia looked around at the home they'd built together, at her sleeping daughter, at the precious new life in her husband's arms. A year ago, she'd been lost, abandoned in the snow with a child and no hope for survival. Now she was surrounded by love, security, and promise. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. Preston's arm tightened around her. "When I found you in that snowstorm, I told you that you weren't freezing that night, not on my watch." "I remember," Amelia said, smiling at the memory despite its danger. "What I didn't know then," Preston continued, his voice thick with emotion, "was that you were the one who would warm me, thaw a heart I thought had frozen for good." Amelia leaned into him, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "We saved each other," she said simply. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. But inside the Reed home, all was warmth and light and love, a beacon in the wilderness, a testament to second chances, and proof that sometimes being left in the snow could lead to finding your way home.